Hi, everyone. Welcome to Consulting with Authority. This is Scott Cantrell. Really excited to be joined today by the founder and president of Fairway Business Advisors. He's also the co-author of a book called Start It, Grow It, Sell It, The Journey of Business, which we'll talk more about. And has had a very interesting and varied career, which we'll get into, that has brought him to being a business coach and business strategist today. Really excited to have him on our podcast today. Jeff Rasmussen, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be with you, Scott. Thank you.
Excellent. So kick us off here, Jeff. Give us a little bit of insight and intelligence into where you came from, how you found yourself in this world, because I know, like so many of us, it wasn't, you weren't growing up as a kid saying, oh, I'm going to be a business coach or a business strategist when I get older. There were other things that happened along the way. So kind of give us that quick outline.
No, it's a long way from being little boy's dream of being a baseball player.
Of course, that's right. Yeah.
It doesn't always work out that well. So no worries. But yeah, I also start kind of at the college stage. I mean, I went to the University of Iowa and studied accounting. So then I went through that, and then that was all well and good. And I spent 20 years in finance. I'm a recovering CPA. I got to the point in my life and my career where I just said, I think I've done what I want to do in finance. And I was working for a printing company in Eastern Iowa. And during that process, we started getting serious about quality. The quality movement was kind of going on in that era. The whole Duran, Deming, Crosby, triad of quality theories.
Right.
And it really interested me. So we didn't really have anybody in-house. It was a small-ish company, 150 employees, and we really didn't have anybody in-house that was that was right up their alley. So we were talking one day, and I said, hey, how about if I get us started on having a quality system? Because I had a little bit of experience that in my previous company, also in printing. I've got a number of years in printing. We talked about a little bit about what that would look like, and decided, do we go lean? Do we go Six Sigma? That type of thing. So we ended up going the lean route, but before we did that, we wanted to create an actual framework for quality. More to the behavioral side of things and the mentality side of things. So we did that, and that was super fun for me, and it really got me interested in operations. And even though I have my CPA certification, which I don't really use anymore, but I was really throughout my career after I left public accounting interested in the operational side of finance and how can finance make businesses better. And so I thought to do that, I really needed to know what was going on the shop floor. So as I was in manufacturing businesses, I had a desire to be out there on the floor working with the operations management to help them do a better job, understand their costs, understand what waste costs. It's not just the materials that you throw away as part of the waste process. It's the time. Mm-hmm. Time's a killer in manufacturing. So the old time is money thing was very evident as we had those conversations. And the more I did that, the more I really thought, I think my future's in operations. So that's where I ended up. Take a fast forward kind of to 2008 when the economy went down, the first most recent time.
Right.
I left there at their request. I mean, they were cutting back left and right. So I left the printing company, went to work for another business that turned out not to be the right spot for me. And at that point, then I bought my own business. It was an auto repair business, oddly enough. And it was always a hobby of mine. I was kind of a car geek. And so I took a hobby and made it into a job. I still own that today, even as I'm doing my business coaching. But it just, all those stops along the way, from finance, then getting into quality, then into operations. I had a little stint in sales and marketing, made me ready to own my own business. I couldn't have done it, 15 or even 10 years before. Our two sons were grown up and out of the house. So I didn't miss any of their stuff by starting my own business. And then once you do that, of course, you throw yourself at it. And with my wife's blessing, of course. And so yeah, that's kind of the very, very Reader's Digest condensed 30-year version of that. So
No, it's tremendous. And so I can certainly relate from I don't have the background that you have in terms of finance, ops, and accounting, but having, done different things within different firms, played different roles, put on different hats, you do kind of have to get to a point where you're saying, okay, I feel like I can do this. Now I'm going to need help, but I feel like I can do this successfully. And I know enough about the different areas of business to proceed. So that brings us to Fairway Business Advisors. So give everybody a little bit of an overview of what Fairway Business Advisors is, who you work with, and the types of services and really the types of results you help your clients get.
Sure. I mean, it was when we moved from Iowa to Wisconsin about 5 years ago, and I really didn't have a specific job that I was doing up here other than supporting my auto repair business in Iowa. Mm-hmm. So I started volunteering for the SCORE organization, which is part of the federal government. And I really enjoyed that. And I thought, hey, okay, if I can do that on a volunteer basis, maybe I can do this part-time and work with a little bit larger companies. Typically with SCORE, I work with startups or very recently post-startup that are trying to get their feet on the ground. But I thought, well, if I can do that, maybe I can get into this with a little bit more advanced companies that are down the road a little bit. And it kind of ties into one of the themes in our book. And just, things kind of came together for me with the SCORE experience and then starting to write the book. In the book, we talk about moving from working in the business to working on the business. Sure, and that's really the focus of my coaching business. I work primarily with printers and manufacturers because that's my background. That's what I know. Kind of know the lingo. I know people in that industry and in those two industries. So we combining the knowledge of kind of working on your business and finding companies that are stuck. You run into people all the time. They say, "Oh, I have my own business," and I can't help but start talking to them a little bit. And they say, oh yeah, I work 60, 70 hours a week. That's the way it is when you own your own business. And I go, well, it doesn't have to be that way. Right. You kind of get this deer in the headlights look on their face. And I had this happen at a high school football game for which I'm the PA announcer for them. And we had a lightning delay. And I started talking to a guy about that. And I said that to him, and he just, he needed to change the subject really fast. He had no idea what I was talking about. But it's a real common thing, and I find that as I run across business owners, they're typically really successful, but they're kind of the lid on their own business. Yeah, and so they need to learn how to pop that cap a little bit, step back, and get people in the right places so they can still be the owner, the boss, the CEO. Let other people take care of some of those other functions, and they usually take off and they can grow again. The backside of that is when they're ready to sell. Now, if they do what we talk about and implement the things we talk about, that's a turnkey business now, and that's a sellable asset. So that if they're the revenue generator, it's not going to sell for much, if anything. But now that it's a going concern, just swap out owners. That's valuable, and so they generate value at the back end when they understand that. In addition to the stress they're under and the number of hours they're working. It really, they get the sense behind what I'm talking about in terms of transitioning how you behave in the business to something much more, not hour by hour, minute by minute, but working again on the business instead of right down in the dirt with it. So. Yep.
No, I mean, I think that's really, really important. And my latest firm is relatively new, and so I've certainly had that experience about. Working really, really long days or working really long weeks for an extended period of time, and trying to make sure that I am not becoming the logjam or the bottleneck within my own company, that I'm not arbitrarily or unnecessarily limiting my own capacity. And I still find that I still get in my own way from time to time. But I think the key thing is having an awareness of it and knowing that there is an alternative and people like you out there to help people like me, free that capacity, free that capability up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you're, like you said, you haven't been at it real long. So it's a natural, a lot of people think, oh, I just can't cut and run. So that's not the way it works. So it's a progression. It's an evolution, not a revolution. Yeah. And so you might go from 100% in the business to 5% working in the business. So we pick one thing. Let's start with you handing this off to somebody else who's perfectly capable of doing it. Okay, how's that going? Okay, that works. Yeah, I like that. Okay, let's take another thing. Let's find another task and another task. And you usher them out of the day-to-day business until, there's a balance in there too. They're not going to completely step away. I mean, not everybody's crazy enough to do what I've done and move 300 miles away from my business. So that came with its own set of painful lessons, and so they get to learn from those painful lessons on my part too. But we're out there. I've hired coaches as well. I mean, I practice what I preach.
Gotcha. Sure.
None of us knows everything, and we all need help sometimes. And admitting that, I'll be honest, is not an easy thing. Our egos get in the way in a big way. Yeah. But swallow your pride, and which I did, and got some help, and it really helped me.
Yeah. Well, same here. That's my experience as well with the mentors and coaches that I've worked with. Let's talk a little bit about, so maybe it's a good time to talk about the book and your co-author who has an interesting story. So I'll let you talk a little about that, but specifically, most of the listeners and viewers of this podcast, they may be in the process of starting a new practice or starting a firm, but regardless, virtually all of them are thinking about they're in growth mode, right? How can I expand and grow more and more? So maybe within the scope of you talking about the book, how it came to be, your co-author, who your co-author is, and so forth, you can start to dive a little bit into business development. What you've experienced and focusing in on that grow pillar of the three: start, grow, sell. Focus in on that growth piece, and we'll have a conversation there.
Yeah, you bet. Well, Lou Bannock is my co-author, and this was really his brainchild. Lou is a banker in the Milwaukee area. He and I met. The date's a little fuzzy, 87 to 89, somewhere in there. I was working for a printing company, and just had joined this bank, and we were doing some letter of credit financing overseas for buying computer chips for books that we were producing at the printing business, and it happens that he was a NCAA champion wrestler at the University of Iowa and an Olympic gold medalist, as was his twin brother. So if you follow college wrestling at all and you're of a particular age, Ed and Lou Bannock.
Sure.
And so Lou came and we met, and it was really interesting. Of course, I knew who he was on campus because he was somebody, and I was just one of 30,000 other students, at the university. So I was just a regular guy. But when we met, we just really hit it off, and we stayed in touch over the years. And probably, 2016, somewhere along those lines, he reached out to me and said he was writing this book. So he said, would you take a look at it? And so I did, and gave him a number of pages of comments. And through all of our conversations, he long story short, he says, hey, you want to co-author this with me? And I was honored, of course, but my wife and I were moving. We were building a house, and I go, geez, I don't think I could take on anything else and do it justice.
Right.
So he appreciated that, and we just kind of went on our way. And so probably, I don't know, a little more than a year later, I called him up and said, hey, Lou, how'd that book turn out? Because, I've got a bunch of comments on it and then feedback, and it's grown. And it's kind of unwieldy right now, and I'm really not sure what to do with it. And we had a long conversation, and we had bounced some ideas off of each other. And he says, well, my offer still stands if you want to co-author it with me. So I decided at that point I would.
That's fantastic.
So the gist of the book, it started out, and Lou will admit this, so I'm not talking out of school. I'm not picking on him. That it's kind of read like an economics textbook, just like you'd think a banker would write. And so when if he watches this podcast, he'll laugh. But so we turned it into what we call a business novel. We follow this fictitious couple, Nellie and Harvey, as they get out of their corporate jobs and begin to start a business. And it goes through the kind of necessarily detailed portion of preparing a business plan. It's a little hard to read that part of it, just because it's real.
Yeah.
And for
Right.
those of us that have created a business plan for a business we were starting, the pain that goes into that, and the details, and the I's you have to dot, and the T's you have to cross, and then the banker that you're going to borrow money from, they got 117 more questions.
Right.
Well, by the time you got this business plan, and it takes weeks and weeks and weeks to do it. So it's very real, and people go, yeah, that part's kind of hard to read. And we go, yeah, but when you do it, you'll understand why we wrote it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it goes through the launch phase, and then we kind of cut off, and then we slip, and we call that working in the business. Then there's the second section of working on the business, where that's where the growth really can take off, and that's where the techniques that I talk about in my coaching business ties in with what we talk about in the book. How you need to step back from being in the middle of every little thing, not wear every possible hat in the business, and let it grow. Get out of the way, let it grow, hire good people. We talk in there about the BizFab 5, which is economics, accounting, finance, business law, and communication. And communication in there is really the most important one of all of those, because if you're going to lead the business, you have to be really an effective communicator. And so we talk about that a lot in the book. And then ultimately, when we get to the part where we're talking about working on the business, that's where that communication comes in a big way. Because instead of having everything that's just in your head and you're doing it, you've got to communicate what's in your mind, translate it into something that the people that are working for you and with you can use to take your vision and act it and make it become a reality. And that's the challenge that a lot of entrepreneurs that have. And I've worked with entrepreneurs as an employee, getting them to be able to articulate their vision in such a way that the team members can take it and run with it is no small thing. And so we talk about that in the book. And then ultimately, we get to the point where we call the third section of the book is we call it working through the business, which is where you realize the value that you created in the business by making it turnkey, making it run without you being there on an hour-to-hour, day-to-day basis. And being able to, we talk about business valuation a little bit, what goes into that, how a business is valued. So they kind of have an idea of how that will work when they go to sell it, and maybe have a business broker helping them exit the business so that they have a chunk of money that's greater than their investment that they can use for at least part of their retirement. So that's kind of the progression throughout the book, and it's got after every section there's kind of a Q&A in there to help them take points away from the book, and we think it's very useful. And after the first section, a pretty fun read.
Absolutely. No, I'm looking forward to diving into it myself. And for those of you who didn't catch the title before, Start It, Grow It, Sell It by Jeff Rasmussen and Lou Bannock.
Lou Bannock, that's correct. Yep. Start It, Grow It, Sell It, The Journey of Business.
Yes, The Journey of Business. Very good. Excellent.
It's on Amazon and on draft to digital in every other format other than Kindle. So it's out there for however you read your books. It's out there.
Perfect. So then to that end, in terms of your past businesses and in terms of the current consulting business, maybe kind of share what have your growth strategies been? What have you consistently gone back to from a when you're trying to identify new opportunities, get access to prospective clients, create those meaningful conversations? What are some of the strategies you've used in the past? What are some things you're doing now? Sure. Obviously, the book itself, I know how powerful a tool like that can be in terms of being visible, credible, establishing your authority in a marketplace. So you've got that tool now that maybe you didn't have before, but kind of give us a quick overview about your experience related to that.
Sure. You're right. The book is a great tool, and that's kind of where Lou and I are at on that. We thought maybe it was going to be the thing that we sold. And as he and I both kind of approached retirement, we're working on what we're going to do with the book, and we think it's really going to be a tool in our tool bag as we maybe teach and coach and present to organizations. We've both done things. We live about 4.5 hours away from each other, so he's worked with some high school scenarios down in southeastern Wisconsin. I'm in northwestern Wisconsin. I've done the same thing here, and just had really good results in trying to plant seeds in the young entrepreneurial community.
Mm-hmm.
But the big thing that I think has been really consistent in businesses that I've helped grow, even when I was in finance, the main thing we've found is you've got to know who your customer is, and don't just produce a product, solve their problem.
Mm-hmm.
Printing, I spent 20 plus years in printing, and it's really easy. And printing's kind of funny because it's the only industry that I can think of whose name is derived by the process it's in.
That's a great point. Yeah.
The everything else is the product. The automotive industry, the food industry, even the
Mm-hmm.
restaurant industry. It's the building that you go into. But printing is the printing industry. Well, that's the process. Nobody else is defined by their process.
Correct.
So
yeah.
that was a bit of a challenge. Well, we put ink on paper and we bind things together and we glue things together and we make brochures. And that worked for a long time until the early 2000s, and it
Mm-hmm.
got very commoditized.
Yeah.
So we realized that we had to, and the word pivot's overused, but really pivot the marketing message. And we were kind of blessed because we knew lots of marketing agencies. We printed for a lot of them. So, they kind of helped us change the mindset on that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, we don't just print a 48-page catalog. We're printing. It's a printed document that has the solution to somebody's problem in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we had a myriad of customers. And so the whole idea behind it is we're helping create the marketing for these companies and that they can solve their problem. We're just not putting ink on paper anymore. It had more value to it than that. And that really helped differentiate the business from the commodity printers that sold only on price. It used to be an old joke. You can have price, delivery, and quality, pick 2 out of 3.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we didn't want to play that game anymore. And so, to our owners' credit, we made that move to being part of their marketing solution instead of just a printed product.
That's, I don't mean to interrupt, but that's a huge point, because in virtually any industry, in particular printing, I can imagine the upheaval that has happened over the last couple of decades related to printing. But you're citing something I think that is pervasive in so many industries, and ours and listeners and viewers included, certainly, in this idea of differentiation. How do you separate yourself from every other so-called, business strategist or business coach or consultant or whatever label or word they want to use to describe what they do or who they are? How do you truly differentiate yourself? And what you're talking about in terms of a printing company being able to, what I wrote down was it was you elevated the position of the company, right? Yeah. So it was no longer about you elevated yourself from basically vendor level to partner level.
Yeah.
Right. And that's more than just semantics, right? There's a true difference in how you talked about what you did, and then probably how you delivered your services, and even the process through which you delivered the services, right? So what kind of questions you were asking the client, you elevated that position. And it wasn't like you said, it wasn't just about putting ink on paper. It was truly finding out what the needs, challenges, desires, objectives were of the client. And then the way we happen to fulfill those is by putting the right ink in the right place on the right paper.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're right. It does elevate to the partner level because we're helping them solve a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that really translates to what I'm doing now. And, even to the auto repair business, there's a very clear problem. My car doesn't move.
That's right.
I need to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
So that industry is very clear because it's the auto repair industry. We fix what's broken.
Yep.
And, in the Midwestern U.S. especially, we live and die by our vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
If you're living in Chicago, in New York City, LA, there's a lot of public transport.
Right.
In Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where my shop is, there's buses, but most people drive a car because
Sure.
the buses only take certain routes. So, and then a lot of people drive 40, 50 miles, not minutes, miles. We talk about minutes in the Midwest, and it's miles in some of the big minutes. We talk about miles in the Midwest, and it's minutes in a big city.
Yeah.
And, but it might be only 4 miles. And so we put miles on our vehicles in the Midwest. So yeah, it's been kind of the same deal. And so when I stepped into the coaching arena, I realized, okay, there's a lot of businesses that I could help, but where's the logical place for me to be? Well, printing and manufacturing. That's where I spent a big chunk of my time. Being in finance or operations or sales and marketing, it doesn't really matter. That's the industry that I know. I know people in there. I know the jargon. I love those industries. I like when raw materials are turned into something new. It just fascinates me. So then it was, okay, what problem am I solving? And there's lots of problems in the business that I could solve, but some of them really aren't my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is not how to find better employees. So there's HR people out there to do that.
Sure.
And can I help them with sales? Yeah, but my background is in finance and operations, and so I can help you. Know your numbers. We talk about in the book. We talk about know your numbers, and so many business owners do not know their numbers.
Right.
What's your gross margin? Just blank stare. They might guess a little bit. How do you define that? Well, they can go figure it out.
Yeah.
But you got to use that in your business, and so that there's operational metrics. What are your speeds? What's waste? What is your in printing? We use make ready. It's getting the press ready to print. So with new digital presses, make readies like that. It used to take hours.
Yeah.
And you whittled it from 3 to 2 hours. That was a big win at $400 or $500 an hour on the press. So yeah, I mean, I had to figure out what problem do I solve, and then just kind of reverse engineer from there what my services were going to be, and that works. So.
Yeah. Let's talk about operations for a second. Virtually every aspect of business is operationally driven in some shape, form, or fashion, whether it's strategic and intentional and planned, or whether it's just, oh, well, this is the way I'm going to do it today. Right. There's still a choice. There's still an operational choice being made, right? Yep. And so coming from the space the spaces that you've been in, and knowing this market, right? Knowing the market of business coach, strategist, consultant, and the nature of selling a service, the nature of selling, your expertise, your knowledge, your skill, your service into another business, often to the business executives or the leader of that business. I know that even, and you talked about this in the scope of your book, when I was just starting this new firm, and I've started 2 or 3 companies before this one. And so I knew what was going into it, but there were still things, right? The laws change, things change. I having to learn new things. There were things that I had people do for me before that I was doing on my own, or that I didn't have someone immediately, readily at my fingertips to handle that for me. Right. But from an ops standpoint, considering a traditional consulting firm, someone starting a consulting firm or someone operating a consulting firm, what would you say are, I can give you a couple of examples of key challenges, but what do you see in terms of where a lot of people in our world are going wrong operationally? And this gets straight back to the point you were making before about how we become our own, sometimes our own worst enemy. We become the bottleneck in terms of our delivery. Maybe speak to that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. I think it was W. Edwards Deming said, in one of the quality gurus, he said, all work is a process. And if it's a process, you can be measured. And if you can measure it, you can improve it. So when you look at that from the standpoint of, a lot of consultants and coaches, start out as solopreneurs. But, and I did. And I've had a period where I've spent more time marketing myself and generating business than I did actually coaching. And
right.
I didn't see that one coming. I mean, it didn't take long to see it. I'll tell you that. I mean,
sure.
And it lasted for a while because I had to generate some revenue to be able to hire somebody to do some of the marketing for me, which I've done. I mean, so at the end of the day, I'm not to the point now where I can step back from that business and have a team doing a lot of the stuff. So I've outsourced to, marketing providers, sales funnel people. I hired my own coach to help me do this better, that type of thing. But yeah, what the focus ultimately has to be is as the owner, or in my case, owner, chief cook and bottle washer, and as many things as I have to do, but not everything that I could do.
Right.
Got to focus on actually producing the revenue. At the end of the day, my job is to coach people and help their businesses become more efficient, more effective, and grow and become turnkey.
Yep.
So I had to shed the tasks that were preventing me from doing that. And that was an evolution as well. I mean, I started out doing everything, and I kind of recommend that, actually, to do everything. So you find out what it takes to get it done, because when you do have to hand it off, then you can coach whoever you're handing it off to on all the times you stubbed your toe, so they don't reinvent the wheel. So you kind of if you can hand them a almost ready-made process and say, look, I know you're an expert in this. I know you're an expert in lead gen, for example, but here's the things that I did wrong. Here's the things that I found out don't work in my target market,
right?
Printing and manufacturing. So I could hand that off. So I do recommend that owners do everything, but not forever.
Yeah.
There's a time, and sometimes it's easy to recognize the time, and sometimes it's not easy to recognize, hey, I need to let go of more. I've got a client that he knew he needed to do something, because he's getting to the age of where he's thinking about selling. And he knew he needed some help. He just didn't know what to do. So we've been working through that, and he's been handing off this and that, and we've gotten a lot of things off of his plate over the last couple of months. He's at the point where now he's going to hire somebody to do estimating and purchasing, which is like the biggest remaining piece of what he's been doing. And so because he even said, I think I need to hire somebody to do the estimating for me. That was his idea. So it was awesome, because he gets it now.
Yeah, he's getting
it. Is turned on. And so we went through that, worked on a job description. I said, okay, now what are you going to do? Well, I'm gonna focus on making sure my guys are well trained. Think about what training we need. Be out in the community more, and it's like pre-selling.
Yes.
At the end of the day, the estimate is part of the sales process, but he's going to be out there, be the face of the business, instead of doing the work that he used to do. He used to, as he said, I used to get in a truck every day. Well, now he's not going to do that. So yeah, I think when you're in what we do, you've got to shed the things that aren't the actual revenue generation process until we get to the point where we grow it. And then we become like the head coach, and we've got coaches out there that are out coaching business owners for us.
Yeah. The model, that approach, that philosophy, that model makes perfect sense to me. I was thinking back to what I heard. I can't remember exactly where it came from, but this idea of leaders and owners of businesses, we often have to start at that $10 an hour level work, right? The low level work where we're doing everything. Yeah. We are our own taskmaster, and we are wearing every hat. But I agree with you. I think it's important. I think it's valuable. I don't maybe it's not mandated for everybody, but I think it's really valuable for the owner to roll up their sleeves. At least it has been for me. To roll up my sleeves and get into, right? You do not want me doing finance or accounting very long, but I need to know what gross margin is. I need to know how to run QuickBooks. I need to know what my login is, at least. Right. And so I think it's been very valuable to learn that stuff to a point. And then at some point you're like, okay, now I need to turn it over to an expert, to someone who they can focus solely on that frees up my time. And you move from the $10 an hour work to the $100 an hour work to hopefully the $1,000 and $10,000 an hour work, right? Like you said, revenue generating activity. And one of the things that I always talk about, and I'd love to hear, your thinking around this idea of resource allocation, because I've always said that the difference between a struggling business and a successful business is one thing, and that is how they allocate their available resources. It's not their amount of resources they have available. It's how they allocate their available resources. So in your experience, thinking about a boutique consulting firm, someone who could be a solopreneur just has 2, 3, 4, 5 team members and they're looking to scale and grow.
Yeah.
When it comes to maybe they have a process here or there, but when it comes to them creating out this playbook to continue the metaphor, or to design their own, SOPs or their processes, where would you recommend? How do you recommend they think about solving that problem? Because I know that's not an area of my expertise, certainly, but I can tell you so many of my clients have trouble with that type of thing, right? It's one of those things where, I'll get to that eventually, or I'm so busy right now, I don't have time for it, and they keep putting it off. How would you recommend they wrap their head around it and then actually get moving on it?
Get it done. Yeah. Well, and you're right. I mean, leadership, a big piece of leadership is resource allocation. There's no doubt about it. If you're leading instead of doing, that's one of your primary functions.
Right.
So you're spot on that. I agree with you. As far as getting that done, there's a couple of ways to me that you can get that done. One is you block out calendar time and force yourself to do it. Now, the smart move is to involve whoever is working in those tasks to help you do it, because they probably are doing it differently than you think they're doing it. That's what I find.
Yeah.
If I've got, clients that, they all think, well, here's how this works. Then we actually dig into it a little bit. Oh, yeah, we're not doing exactly like that. They're basically right.
Yeah.
But there's little subtleties that the people who are in it, they recognize the pain and they change it so they don't have the pain.
Mm-hmm.
So, the one way to do it is to have the owner just do the discipline and get in there and get them written with the help of the people that are in the process. I can't stress that enough. Have the people that are in the midst of the process write most of it. And then you be the reviewer and the blesser, because you may find out that they changed something that makes their life easier, but it's negatively affecting the business, and they can't see that.
Sure.
Forest for the trees thing. The other thing is bringing somebody from the outside to do it for you. I mean, if it just really isn't your forte, or it makes you sick to your stomach thinking about doing it. I mean, accounting's that way for a lot of people. I kind of do it in my sleep, and I still do it for my own business, which it's a no. I get it, but I can do it in so little time compared to most people, though. So I just do it. But there are things that I just don't want to do. I don't like cold calling.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would have somebody doing that for me. When we talked the last time, I told you I've used LinkedIn for my lead gen.
Right.
That I kind of like, because they're kind of warmed up. They at least connected with me.
Right.
Now I can have a conversation with them and not feel like I'm pestering them.
Yeah.
Being a pest to somebody is just not my thing. But if I'm talking to them and learning about their business and they have something I can help them with, I'm doing them a disservice by not saying, hey, I can help you with that. If they say no, okay.
Right.
But, at that point, we're kind of friends. So it's no big deal. You got to find those things that make you nauseous, and you don't want to do those. That's the whole idea behind having your own business.
Exactly.
You have to do those. So.
I think that's as good advice I've ever heard, frankly, Jeff, is find the things that make you nauseous and either grit and bear it and get those done first, or go ahead and let someone else knock them out for you.
There's probably somebody that likes the things you don't. That's
100.
We all plug each other's holes. That's, as you grow your firm, keep bringing in people that do things well that you don't do well.
Yep.
There's no sense of duplicating that. Don't bring in another you. Bring in somebody who's not like you, and they fill in for your gaps.
Right. I think that's really good direction and advice. Real quick, you mentioned LinkedIn. Talk a little bit about this, kind of backtracking a little bit, but I think this is valuable. Talk a little bit about what you do on LinkedIn, what your experience has been like. Obviously, at the time of recording this interview, LinkedIn just kind of put the kibosh on frequency and amount of messaging just in the last few weeks.
Right.
But I think it's still an incredibly valuable platform when it's used properly. Mm-hmm. So kind of, if you don't mind, describe how you are using it in terms of filling out your network, creating new opportunities.
Yeah, I'm still using it. I've had to retool. It's probably been, I'm going to say 6 weeks since my account got, kind of the bug where I'm not allowed to send out more than 100 connection requests a week. I was doing 375 to 400 a week. And that gave me plenty of pipeline to reach out to people, and it's like any funnel. You 400 here, and then, 80 connect with you, and then, one or two are willing to have a conversation, and one of them becomes a client. So, and that's fine. Well, now I get 25 out of 100. So now you start doing the math, and I'm going to get a new client every 6 months or something like that.
Everything's much slower. Yes.
Yeah, it's much slower. So, and I was just on a webinar this morning that Duck Soup put on. And I use Duck Soup, actually. I use it to automate my connections.
Yeah.
It's easy. That's one of those things. It's like Snore. It felt like completely non-value added work, so I automated it.
Yep.
And it didn't overdo it. The people that overdo it, you get in LinkedIn jail. And so if LinkedIn's watching, yes, I use it. Sorry. But what they were talking about was taking your search lists on, and Sales Navigator, I think, is a really important piece of it, because the search capabilities of Sales Navigator. Yeah, I know it's $80 a month. It's a lot for some people. I get it. It's a lot for me. But I bit the bullet, and it paid for itself very quickly. But because the search capabilities are so intense, you can really parse your list to just the ones that you think are the best chance to connect with you.
Yeah.
Because absent the connection, you're nowhere. So, and the one thing that I have this agency doing for me now is, and I didn't know you could do this because I didn't study it hard enough, really, but with Sales Navigator, you can pick not only who you want, but who you don't want.
So, they have the suppression option where you,
So they're suppressing like 15 different things on my searches.
Right.
And that's really helped because now my connection rates definitely took a spike. It's taking a spike, to use proper grammar. And that's helped me out a lot. And I just got a couple responses today that sound like, okay, I need to get on the phone with these people because they got some struggles. And so it's been a while, to be honest. And so they've helped me. And it's still there. I think, something that I want to do, and something I thought about early on in this is create a presentation and do a little more public speaking to augment LinkedIn, because I don't think it can be my only tool now. It was for my first quarter was the best quarter I've had, and that was prior to LinkedIn turning my account, dialing me down. Some others have been dialed down by then, as I understand it now. By May, I guess it's been more than a few months. It's been May or June, I think, is when I got dialed back. But I think I'm going to need more than just that going forward. So I've got to sit down and work on a presentation, and then get out in front of some people and make some speeches to chambers of commerce and things like that, where my target market is. Now, it'll probably necessarily make me not necessarily be in front of printers all the time, which I really like working with, but that's okay. I can help any small to medium sized entity. Printing is a logical place for me to market in because of my background.
Right. But the principles apply across
any industry, any business. But I can be more local. I can work with, I do have an electrician who's a client. I've had a contractor who was a client.
Sure.
So I don't just work with printers. That's just where I market myself, because it's logical. But yeah, I mean, I can work with anybody. So I think I need to do that. That's my next step, and that I'm working on the plans for that to get out and be in front of community members a little more than just Siemens on Sunday at church or in a restaurant or something like that. So
well, you and I spoke about this on our previous conversation. I will affirm your direction 100%. I'm a huge proponent of live presentations, whether virtual or in person. Probably going to be a combination. Pre-pandemic, during pandemic, all virtual, but post-pandemic, all going to be hybrid between in-person and virtual presentations.
Sure.
Between that and what you're doing on LinkedIn, and then leveraging, your co-authorship of the book,
Yeah.
I think you're positioned incredibly well to really, have a lot of meaningful impact. But thank you for sharing, what you did around your process on LinkedIn. You talked about the connection automation, and I think that's really important too. And I hope that people heard that, because the reality is there are, this is part of that. This is part of the operations aspect of business, right? We didn't talk about automation, but you can automate, delegate, and outsource. And this automation piece, I think, is really critical. Now, you can go, you alluded to this, you said it, you can go too far on the automation piece. And so I always tell my clients, automate the things that make sense to automate, but stop there.
Yeah.
Right. And when you need to pick up that personal relationship, could you automate that part of it? Yeah, you could, but you're probably going to pay the price short-term or long-term.
Yeah.
Right? Certain things need to be interpersonal, need to be relational, need to be manual in that sense.
Yeah.
So
There's, to me, for what I do, and I think for a lot of your audience does, you got to get it, as one of the LinkedIn gurus says, you got to take them off LinkedIn.
Right.
You got to get on a call with them, or a meeting, across the table, or a Zoom meeting or something like that. And really, very few people are doing deals on LinkedIn, on the platform.
Correct.
Yeah, there's the cold speculators that we all get hit with, which is why the limit now, because there was a ton of that.
Exactly right.
And yeah, I know LinkedIn has terms of services, and you're not supposed to use automation tools, but I know be honest, if I'm, when you're paying $80 a month for Sales Navigator, they give you a little bit of leeway, and I'm trying to make sure I stay under those limits. And it's kind of like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge thing. But ultimately you've got to create a relationship, and it's the old know, like, and trust.
Right.
And you got to get them to know you and like you and trust you before they're going to buy from you. That is any sales environment anywhere on the planet.
Yep.
That's how you grow.
And it's been that way since a long life, for forever. It will be that way forever. It's just the nature of how we create that visibility and that trust, and likability changes, right? And so we have these different media tools available, but the process, know, like, trust, is the same.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And LinkedIn is a great platform for posting articles, commenting on people's feeds.
Absolutely.
I kind of go like this. I'm up and down on that. I get really busy on it for a while, and then kind of my brain runs out of ideas, so I don't post for a while. And then I get back to posting, and just life throws commentary at you, and I go, oh, I can post on
that's something to write about. Yeah,
that's something to write about. And so then I'll get 2 or 3 of those in a month, and I might go a month. I'm kind of in that lull right now. I haven't had any real inspirational things I want to talk about, but sometimes I'll just read an article and share it. I'll read an article in a magazine, or the e-version of a magazine. Forbes magazine's always got good stuff. Fast Company's got great stuff. Inc. magazine's got great stuff. And so I'll just take an article, and it may not be printing related, although I do take things out of Printing Impression magazine and put them up there for my printing clients. Yep. But, there's anything that's a good leadership related article, for example. Football coach, Tony Dungy, he's great. I mean, follow Tony Dungy whether you like sports or not. The man, he's a devout Christian. He's a gentle man. He's brilliant, great leader. There's people like that out there. Find them, and find people that speak to your personal, what goes on inside your head and heart. Yeah, and follow them, and it really helps you out.
Yeah, no, I think it's LinkedIn in particular in the B2B space is such a rich universe of opportunity.
Yeah.
And so I think it's largely only limited to terms of service and our imaginations, in terms of what's possible on LinkedIn. But it's amazing some of the connections. And when I say connections, I do mean the transactional connection that's made on LinkedIn. Connect and I accept. But I really mean relationships. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, Jeff, that we met on LinkedIn.
We did.
I think I sent out a LinkedIn a connection request. You accepted it. We started a conversation, and here we are.
Yeah.
So it is a fantastic platform when it's used properly and thoughtfully, like you've described.
Yeah,
that's good. As we come up on our time here, Jeff, one last question, not necessarily an easy question, but I think a very valuable question. You've had an extensive career, done a lot of different things, had tremendous impact in different industries in different ways. Sort of asking you to aggregate all of that experience into just a few short sentences. What have been your best lessons learned? And really this, have people ask, well, business lessons or personal lessons? Either or both. What have been the most impactful personal or business lessons you've learned from your business career that you might impart or share with
Sure.
The audience?
Well, I think this lesson applies to both business and personal, and that is, and it's this: be curious.
Mm.
I tell so many people ask me about, taxes and things that you would ask a bean counter,
Right.
I go, I don't know. I've been out of that for so long. I thought you went to school for accounting. I did, but my life and career took me other places. Well, how did you end up doing that? I said, I was curious.
I wanted
to learn about it. It interested me, and it interested me so much that I wanted to do that for a job for a while.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get it? How did you become? Well, the business broker that helped me buy the auto repair business,
right?
Brian, he knew me. He was a banker, and I was a chief financial officer at a printing company. And we just kind of stayed in touch over the years. And I called Brian up one day as I was driving back home from the job that turned out not to be a great job after I lost my printing job. And I said, I see you that have an auto repair shop for sale. And he said, yeah, why? I said, I'm interested. He said, why? And all he knew, I was a finance guy.
Right.
Well, he had no idea my first job in high school was working in a gas station back when gas stations actually repaired cars.
Right.
Some of you watching this will remember that. But yeah, be curious and learn. And it just leads to so many cool learnings that, curiosity did it kill the cat? Yeah. But it hasn't killed me yet. So.
Yeah. Well, I think the note is a fantastic one. I wrote it down, put a big star next to it. As we are all human beings, we all have varied interests, or most people have varied interests. Some people are laser focused, and that's the lane they stay in, and that's great. But I think a lot of us have varied interests. And when we're in the role of business leader or entrepreneur, or we're starting our own business, we often think, or even after we've had our business for a while, right? We often think, oh, we've our die is cast, right?
Yeah.
We feel stuck where we are, and that we won't be able to transition out of that role. And I think that's a self-imposed. I'm confident that's a completely self-imposed limitation.
Absolutely.
I think if we can stoke that curiosity, it will lead us into different paths, and maybe the path you go down, you turn around and come back, but that's okay, right? You had that experience, and you probably learned a lot from it. Worst case scenario.
Sure.
So, and then on the flip side, it could lead you into something that is more fulfilling or more exciting or just different than what you've been doing. It opens up the world of opportunity just by maintaining that curiosity and letting yourself, allowing yourself to be curious.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the things that I've learned, I mean, just from being curious, and a lot of them didn't turn out to be a business thing.
Yeah.
It's just, my wife always ask me, she goes, where did you learn that? Because I'll spit out some kind of information.
Yeah.
And, and I go, I was talking to somebody, and they mentioned something. So I went and researched it and learned about it.
Cool.
I'm probably the king of trivial trivia. I mean, I just know all kinds of things that are semi-useless to me, but I know them, don't I?
Well, that's good. I'm not sitting down with you to play Trivial Pursuit anytime soon. You and my father-in-law. That's tough. Listen, Jeff, thank you so much for your generous time today, your expertise. I have 2 pages full of notes just from our conversation here. So I trust everyone got a lot of great value from it. I'll look forward. Yeah, thank you. I will look forward to our next conversation sometime soon.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. For Consulting with Authority, this is Scott Cantrell wishing you all the best of success. Thank you for listening. I hope you got a ton of value out of this episode. And before we go, I want to thank the sponsor of our show, Smart Solutions Media. Smart Solutions Media empowers business owners, consultants, and other independent professionals to easily attract better prospects and transform them into long-term clients. If you're a B2B consultant or service professional and would like to start filling your pipeline with better quality prospects, visit us on the web at smartsolutionsmedia.com to learn more about what we can do to help you. Be sure to complete the short 2-minute accelerated growth scorecard you can find on the website, and you'll receive a complimentary strategy session where we'll give you specific insights and recommendations to help you attract high-value clients. Until next time, make sure you are consulting with authority.